Greetings. I'm Amy Bach, the Executive Director and co-founder of United Policyholders. I'm so pleased to bring you this episode of Catch Up. We're going to be catching up with a water and mold damage expert today to add to the information we offer in our libraries, on our website, and in our publications. I'm so pleased to be joined today by Kristofer Griffith with Anderson Group International, a national firm. Kris, can you tell us a little bit about your company and your professional expertise?
Yeah, I run operations for Anderson Group International. We're kind of throughout the states, and we do a lot of catastrophe responses. We also do normal bid work for the schools and the state and municipalities. I personally have been in construction for over 35 years and been in this restoration industry for about 25 years now.
Okay, so your company, as I understand it, you are working in Florida on helping restore hurricane damaged buildings. You're also working throughout California in the aftermath of the storms that hit a lot of communities this month. So if you can start by telling us, what are some of the different ways that water can get into a home or structure and cause damage?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of ways. And what people don't realize is that homes are not waterproof, right? They're not made to be turned upside down and put in a bathtub or a pond or something. So you can have lots of entries or intrusion of water. Some of the most common things obviously are flooding. When the ground is too saturated and you can't get the water away from the house, obviously it'll go into the property. Some of the other things are, like wind-driven rain. Rain can get literally sideways. So if you can imagine your doors or your windows, they're not made to take a garden hose, get up underneath them and spray it in. You're going to get water, in your house. Wind-driven rain also finds things like eaves underneath your roof. They're not made to dispel water, so they'll just go right into your attic. Or if you have any damage or caulking maybe on the exterior of the building that's not been maintained very well, it will actually push the water into the building. You also have groundwater. This is water, may not necessarily be flooding, but it's, again, saturated soil. It can bubble up through your concrete slab through cracks. It can fill up your foundation, underneath your foundation. It'll come up underneath your foundation and fill up. A big one is obviously roof gutters and roof drains. Commercial buildings have, a lot of roof drains and flat roofs. And once debris gets in there and that water can't move, it will find a way into the building. And that's the same with the gutters on your house. If they're close enough to the building and they overfill, they will fill back into the house. There, I got some of my notes here. Can't remember all of them.
I can almost predict the next one: trees, branches.
Yes, and yes, there's obviously damage that occurs to your house. So a tree falls on your house, a branch hits your roof and knocks off a couple shingles. The wind itself pulling some shingles off. This can go with siding. Your gutters, things like that, may become detached from the building and take some important parts of the building with it, that it opens it up to the outside in the rain. Pipes backing up also is another thing. Some cities, not all, have their storm pipes from the outside connected directly to the sewer system. So that backup could be not only just rainwater backup, but sometimes that could be sewage backup inside of a building also. And then things like, some houses and buildings are made to have water in them, and they use a pump, basically like a sump pump, to remove the water from the building. So we've seen quite a few of those where maybe the sump pump doesn't work anymore, and the groundwater comes in and fills up that area.
So there are a lot of ways that water can get in. And of course, United Policyholders is all about helping people collect the full amounts from their insurance companies that they are entitled to when something damages their property. And one of the reasons we're doing this program today is that insurance companies have gotten increasingly tough about what types of water damage they will pay and not pay. So it does matter very much how water got in. So thank you for that information. Then if a homeowner or property owner is trying to figure out how the water got in, and then who they hire to restore their property to its pre-loss condition, what types of experts should they be turning to?
Yeah, there's a few different types. One of them is, companies like ours that do the remediation for water and mold. But you want to ask questions, do they do leak tracing or leak detection, especially if it's on the exterior of a wall? There's also simple plumbers. So you have pipe backups and things like that. Although the water recedes, you want a plumber to come in that has a camera set up to scope out the pipes, because sometimes debris is left behind and things like that, and it could cause more issues. They could also tell you a lot of times, did it come from a backup from the sewer itself, or was it, maybe part of your drain system that clogged the sewer and filled it up? In extreme cases, larger commercial buildings, there's actually building envelope consultants, and they'll come out and look at everything on the building and recommend how, it should be put back together to keep the water out. Companies like ours or leak detection companies, you got to make sure they're using the correct science. They are using moisture meters and things like that, because it really is a science tracing water. I would never recommend just taking somebody's word that looks at a wet wall and says, hey, it's coming from this area. Because in one scenario, let's say a window has some water around it. It could be the window itself. It could be the flashing around the window. It could be the siding around the window. It could also be a roof leak, or even a simple thing like a pipe jack that has a crack in it, and the water's going down the pipe jack, down the pipe, and in through the wall. So it's important to be able to open it up, have somebody that's somewhat knowledgeable in this area, and trace it and confirm that that is the leak.
So if I were to look up, let's say in the Yellow Pages, to try to find your company, what categories would you be listed in?
A lot of companies they're called remediation or mitigation companies. Obviously, the word mitigation means to stop any further damage. So that's one area. It's pretty easy to Google that. That brings up all of us. I would look again. It's asking the questions about the professional. Some people just dry out carpets, so I ask them, hey, how do you find a leak? And if it makes common sense, then usually they've kind of done this before. Okay. Plumbers, same thing. I ask them, can you scope a pipe? Do you have the equipment to do that? And then there are leak detection companies, like you can literally call look up, leak detection. And there's several companies that just do leak detection.
Okay. So we've gone over some of the types of experts you might want to look for. Can you talk a little bit about costs? And do you typically, when water has gotten into your property, do you typically have to pay for it to be diagnosed and repaired on a time and materials basis, or can you hire somebody on a flat fee for that type of work?
So first thing, here in the state of California, if you're working on a residential property, you can give a time and material estimate, but there always has to be a dollar amount associated with that in scope. That's per the CSLB. Commercial buildings, you don't have to do that. But I will say most of the time it's done through time and material, because you're not 100% sure what you have to do until you get started. You don't know where that leak is until you open the wall, or how much work has to be done. Somebody who's very skilled though, and that has done this often, can give you what we call a not to exceed number, or a rough order of magnitude. So they might tell you this is going to be, $5,000 to repair. We won't exceed that. And basically what that ties them to is that if they spend $6,000 to do that, that's on them, right? They said they were only going to go to 5,000. And then you can do change orders through that process to get done what needs to be done. So, and homeowners have the right to say, hey, you're telling me it's $20,000, but can we start at 5,000? Let's just get the wall open up. So, as a client, you can really direct that. The other thing I would ask for is a real scope. So time and material, people might put together, I've got 4 guys for 4 hours, 2 trucks, and here's the material I'm going to use. I'd ask for an actual scope. Well, what room are they working in? How much drywall are they removing? And things like that. And then that really holds them accountable also. And like I said, if they've done this enough, that's pretty easy for them to put together.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of our materials through our roadmap to recovery program that we bring to disaster impacted areas, we emphasize how important a scope of work is, how important it is that you don't just jump right to the bottom line of what's this going to cost me, but before you even get near that, you talk about what kind of work has to be done so that you are clear with the professionals that you're hiring, just like you just laid out. What are they going to do? And then what will they expect you to pay for that phase? And if they need to do, I think with water, it seems like very often there's a lot of diagnostic work that has to be done, right? The moisture mapping, and, before you can even guesstimate how much work, right? You have to see how extensive the damage is. So when we talk about scope, we're talking about defining a project, which I think often, is it fair to say, Kris, has to be done in phases with a water situation, because you don't always know right out of the gate how wet the hidden elements of the building are, correct?
Absolutely. And there's things also that, kind of fall in a gray area, and if you can dry them out in time or if they'll become damaged. So you may want to try to dry them out first before you make the decision to totally destroy them. The other thing too is, if that estimate eventually is getting turned over to an insurance company or something, they definitely want to see a scope of work.
Yep.
It's really hard to answer to anybody to say, hey, we were in there for 4 hours and we did some demo, so it's really important to get that up front.
Yep. That's great advice. Okay, let's talk a little bit about mold. We know there's different types and different levels. What is your general advice to a property owner whose home has been subjected to water where it's not supposed to be?
So that's a tough one. There's so many different types of mold. Mold is in our everyday atmosphere. It's outside, it's inside, and people are, there's certain mold that definitely causes illnesses, but people have sensitivities to mold that don't normally, and it also depends on how many spores are in the air. So for somebody like me to come in and see some growth on the wall and say, hey, that's mold, it's bad for you, that's not possible. We always, on jobs like that, we always recommend getting an environmental hygienist involved, and they come in and they test the air, they count the spores, they tell you what's there, what's hazardous, and things like that. One of the things I always tell homeowners and building owners is, when you have a company and there are a lot of guys who go in there and do demo and they just get going and things like that, if you see some kind of growth, the best thing to do is put plastic over it, seal up that area, and then get a hygienist involved. Because what happens is people do demo and they don't realize it's the spores that are the dangerous part of that growth. And they get in the air and they go all over the house or the building. They may attach to something else and get started somewhere else. But really you're contaminating the whole house. So if you have general contractors who don't specialize in this, a lot of times aren't aware of that. And they'll get going on demo, they'll see mold, hey, no big deal, we'll throw it in a bag. If you're a homeowner, suggest that they seal it up and have a hygienist take a look.
Okay.
We have had some cases that we work with different doctors and things like that, where they can, if you're ill and you think that it's caused by mold, you can go in and get toxicology test by these doctors that specialize in this, and they'll tell you what mold is in your system and what it is that's making you sick and how much of it. And then that information with a hygienist can really pinpoint what you need to get rid of and what's really, your issue within your home.
Okay. Well, thank you. So we're going to move to talking a little bit about insurance. One of the reasons that we're even recording this with you is, as I said earlier, we keep seeing new exclusions, limitations. We see caps on what an insurer will pay for mold remediation. We're seeing caps on what insurers will pay for sewage backup. We're seeing exclusions for water beyond just flooding, right? It used to be pretty black and white, right? Flood damage has been excluded in a home policy for a very, very long time. But things like a pipe break, toilet overflowing, a sprinkler system going awry, a washing machine hose bursts and floods, and the kitchen, those things had always been covered. In recent years, we're starting to see some changes. Can you say, as a general matter, what types of water damage do insurers usually cover, and where are you seeing people having the most difficulty getting an insurance company to pay for repairs of water damage?
Yeah, that's constantly changing, and it's getting a little tougher this year. It's really hard to say what's covered and not covered right now. We're seeing caps on things we don't normally see caps on, like pipe backflow, very low caps like they do with mold and things like that, that don't even cover the cleaning, let alone the reconstruction of a building. There was a sump pump that went out, flooded the basement, and because it was considered groundwater, that wasn't covered. So groundwater is not normally covered. Here in California, floodwater is not normally covered unless you buy that extra policy. It's kind of like having earthquake insurance. In some cases, we're seeing wind-driven rain now that's not covered here in California. I think that some of that has to tie back to some clause in the insurance policy as far as maintenance goes. So if there's, let's say caulking around a window that's deteriorated, or some of the siding's deteriorated, they've been able to not cover the claim like that. And then like I said, flood, anything that's coming across the yard, coming into the house hasn't been covered. So we've seen a lot more jobs not being covered this year than we have in the past in this storm. They are, the insurance companies are referring, basically saying, hey, your area is in a FEMA zone. We suggest calling them. So,
yeah, I mean, this trend, of course, is, really, really problematic. I think a lot of people are getting a very rude surprise from the winter storms, at least in California. And then also certainly in hurricane areas, like you're also working in Florida, right? So,
yes.
And are you seeing insurers denying claims for wind-driven rain there?
Absolutely. That one's pretty common in Florida. I've got to imagine with as many hurricanes as they had and the things that they're trying to not cover there, that maybe there'll be a state involvement like we have for our California Fair Plan here. There's a lot not being covered in Florida right now.
Yeah. Yes. And we're certainly battling and helping policyholders battle as much as we can all over the country. As a matter of fact, this issue of whether an insurer can exclude damage from a failed sump pump. Like, to me, I'm a lawyer, consumer advocate. I'm like, okay, no, that's mechanical breakdown. That should be covered. Same thing with wind-driven rain, in a state like California, where you have the standard form fire policy, that, insurers, there are limits on how creative they can get with their exclusions, but very often, their exclusions they'll change the policy language. And then somebody who's working in the field like you will have clients have their claims denied. If those clients fight back, if they, hire a lawyer, if they, follow our advice and they go to the Department of Insurance and they complain, sometimes you can get those denials reversed. But it definitely feels like it's getting harder for people to get water damage claims paid. And part of the reason that we wanted you to be with us today is because you're one of those valuable experts that can get people to the very first step, which is what happened here as a result of this event, and then what has to be done to restore the property to its pre-loss condition. You mentioned insurers talking about wear and tear or or the lack of maintenance kind of thing. It's a big argument that insurers are starting to make more and more, that this is not a home maintenance policy. This is, you got to keep your house up. But the reality is they do insure that generally they're insuring properties as is, right? They take it as it is. And so, to us, of course, after the fact saying, oh, well, it wasn't in great shape. Well, the time to point that out would have been before you took my money and told me that I was protected, right? Okay, so I think we pretty much covered a lot of the post-loss info. How about in the event of an upcoming storm, what can a property owner check and or do to prevent water intrusion?
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, we do talk about the maintenance stuff, and you should have your roof inspected from time to time. But if you're coming into a big storm season, that's one of the first places. It's just a visual inspection, even by a roofer. Sometimes you don't know you're missing tiles or shingles, and they're misplaced, or you can visually see pipe jacks that are dried out from the summer.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. What is a pipe jack?
Oh, I'm sorry. So when a vent, I say pipe jack, it's a lot of different types of vents on a roof, but when a sewer vent comes through the roof to vent, basically the sewer, there's it's a piece of flashing basically that goes on your roof, and then there's a rubber seal above it, and it's a perfect hole that slides through. So it's got a rubber gasket on it, and that's the common term for it is pipe jack. But those little rubber grommets at the top, they sit in the sun in the heat all summer long. So they do crack, and, normal storms, they'll shed the water, but when you get a lot of water, wind-driven rain, they're cracked, the water will literally run down that pipe and into the house. So.
Okay. So checking that. So we've got, keeping your gutters clean, keeping your drains clean, your storm drains clean. What about sandbags?
So yeah, sandbags, and usually the county or city provides those, and those do help. A lot of people know the obvious ones of putting them in front of their door, or make sure you put them in front of your garages. Your garages are normally attached to the house. People forget about their foundation vents. So you have a little vent in your foundation around the house that you need to keep air coming in and out. Well, if enough water gets in your foundation, it's going to push up, right? So you need to go make sure that you sandbag those off also.
And then I think you had a suggestion about doors, about what you can do in advance.
Yeah, I know it sounds silly and a little thing, but in wind-driven rain, people are, one of the biggest things we see is people are surprised when they have a lot of water at their entry doors or windows. And what's happening is it's literally being pushed up under the door, and it's not made to do that. So simply taking a towel and pushing it up on your threshold will keep that water from coming in and hitting the hardwood floor or the carpet. Some of the other things too we recommend is, everybody's property is made to shed water in a certain direction. So check your drainage, your ditches, your pipes, but also check your neighbor's house and the street out in front of you. Sometimes you have to contact people to get help with that, but if they flood, you're going to flood. So, don't just check your property, check what's around and where that water's going to. Some of the things that can help, especially San Francisco was hit really hard, and I don't think a lot of people realize that their storm system is also hooked to the sewer system. So it gets backed up often. They do make valves. They're one-way valves or shut-off valves, basically, that you could put on the storm side and the lateral to the sewer system, basically that if the water comes back, the little valve shuts and doesn't let it push back into your house. So that can be installed by a professional plumber to help with those types of things also.
Okay. Well, Kris, I think we covered the basics, and I'm so grateful for your time. I just want to reiterate to our viewers that at our website, uphelp.org, we have suggestions for How do you find a covered cause, which has gotten trickier and trickier with water damage, but more importantly, what are the steps you should take? And if your house has been damaged by water intrusion, and one of the first ones is if your insurance company says we don't owe you any money on to pay for this damage, is you want to get another opinion. You don't, it's not a great idea to rely solely on what an insurance company adjuster tells you. It's important to get another opinion. It's also important that if your insurance company says we're not paying this because of this policy language, and you say, show me in the policy where it says you don't owe for this, and they show you language that doesn't sound right to you, that's when you make your voice heard with the California Department of Insurance or your state Department of Insurance, wherever you live. We offer a state by state help directory on our website, and it makes it easy. You go to the map, you click on your state, it'll take you right to the your state insurance oversight agency's website for consumer help, for filing a complaint. And we really encourage you not just to roll over. It's your asset. You bought insurance to protect it. There are professionals out there like Kris that will give you the straight scoop about what happened to your property and what needs to be done to put it back. And we encourage you to seek out that level of expertise. I will say, Kris, I think your company's pretty valuable, pretty unique. I'm glad you're out there. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to add that you think we left out or skipped over?
I just wanted to add to what you were just saying. That was one thing I did want to mention is, if you are denied, don't take that. Right now the insurance companies are overwhelmed with all these storms. They're sending out third parties. Your claim usually gets passed off to 4 or 5 people. So there's a lot of confusion on their side also. So they could read your policy wrong even. So, and we've had experts in the field that come out and they totally misrepresent the claim on how it happened out there or whatever. So yes, always contact somebody like you and double check on that.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to catch up with a water and mold damage expert. Kris, keep up the great work. Thank you for donating your time and expertise to help us educate consumers across the country.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right. That's a wrap.